realize their plight. Joining the panel now is founder and CEO of Share Our Strength, Billy Shore, and the editor of the book, A Place at the Table, Peter Pringle. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us. There's not going to be nearly enough time in this show and our time on air on MSNBC to talk about this problem. It is so painfully under-discussed. Billy, when we talk about food stamps in this country, there is a stigmatization of people, or there has been in the last couple years. It is a life-saving program, and I think you put that in the context of how much a family of four makes to live on the poverty line. It's close to $23,000 for a family of four, $11,000 for an individual, according to the 2011 census. 46.2 million people live in poverty. These are life-saving programs, and yet those who are on them tend to be vilified, and the Paul Ryan budget would like to, cut $134 billion from the program.
And these are near record levels. I mean, we've never had 46 million Americans on food stamps. The Secretary of Agriculture, Tom Vilsack, told me recently that of all the kids in America today, half will be on food assistance at some point during their childhood. So that's remarkable. And how are we going to have a strong America with weak kids, right? You can't do it. I mean, this is such a small investment in the scheme of things. Most of the food and nutrition programs, such a small investment, but the impact on education, the impact on health and nutrition, the impact on economic competitiveness are huge.
It's foundational. Peter, in terms of the stories here, I mean, when you read, when you see the documentary, the book, there's a great Rolling Stone piece that we talked about a couple weeks ago. People, to get on food stamps, it takes work to get on food stamps. I mean, you literally have to have nothing. I will read an excerpt from this Rolling Stone piece. A woman says, I can't tell you how many people have come to my office and say, I couldn't get food stamps because my car is worth too much, said Nancy Kapp, the coordinator of one of the programs. She says, okay, you have a car, but you've lost everything, your house, your job, your pride, and all you have left is the car that you and all of your belongings in it. And they say, you still have too much. Lose it all. You have to have nothing when you already have nothing.
Yes, well, but what we managed to do in the book, as opposed to the film, is to go back to the history of food stamps. How did it start? It started in 1939, after the Depression, and there were orange stamps and blue stamps, and they were all for fresh foods. There was agricultural surpluses, and now what are they for? They've changed. You can now buy, soda pop on food stamps. So we're talking about even when you get those food stamps, you're probably going to get the wrong kinds of food.
Well, and part of the problem is, I mean, $4.62 a day. What can you buy for that, right? If you're actually living on that, Jared, and you talk about what qualifies as poverty in America, what is the poverty line? You mentioned during the break that we went up a little bit from $23,021 as the federal line for poverty.
It goes up with inflation, but I mean, I think the thing to understand about food stamps in the context of the Great Recession was there simply was no other anti-poverty program that responded so effectively and thoroughly. I mean, the reason food stamps rolls went up was because the economy went so far down and so many people lost their jobs and incomes. And unfortunately, much of our safety net hasn't been working in that counter-cyclical way. So yes, the fact that calories are very cheap is a problem that this book, I think, deals with very effectively. But the issue of food stamps as a safety net program has to be one that we protect very assiduously.
And Billy, in terms of the quote that we let in from the book, the notion that those who are on food stamps are the ones that could probably make the most effective argument for food stamps, but they are literally scraping by, and so the dialogue is missing those voices, and has been fairly uninformative at best.
Well, I think that's the key thing to focus on is the fact that the people involved here, particularly children, are not only vulnerable, but they are voiceless, right? Because this is a solvable problem. We're not talking about Syria or Sudan or sequestration, right? We're talking about hunger in the most in the wealthiest, most abundant country in the world. So this is a solvable problem, but there's been a lack of political will. Hopefully it's growing. Ultimately, Jim McGovern talks about this hunger being a political condition. The political will can make a huge difference here, and it's going to take leadership from all of us. One of the things I think the book points out is there's not just the president, it's not just the business community, not just nonprofits. It's going to take all of us to solve this problem.
I think that's right. If you look at the discussion of poverty during the 2012 election, it was non-existent. Bill Clinton did mention the word poverty poverty in his address there. He talked about it within the context of kids, and I think politicians need to do more of that. Democrats used to be the party to do that. You had John Edwards talking about two Americas, right. And in some ways for Republicans you had people like Kemp, but that just doesn't exist anymore. And I think it is in some ways because there is this stigmatization around poverty that is unfortunately intertwined with race.
Peter, you know, the other piece of this is that if 1 in 3 Americans are at or near poverty, 35% of America is obese. And you can see an interlinkage. If you are on food stamps and you're relying on fast food, it is a sort of cyclical, it is a snake eating its own head. I mean, you have to break that cycle.
Well, in the book, we have this piece by Marion Nestle, who's a nutritionist at NYU. And she explains that the cost of fresh foods, since 1980, the cost of fresh foods has gone up 40%, and the cost of processed foods, which are the ones that make you obese, has gone down 40%. It's pretty much as simple as that. And where you go from there is to, you know, try and decide, make our program into this social action.
We begin with the book and then the movie, and having you guys back on as soon as possible after this show. Thank you so much for coming on board. The book again is A Place at the Table, and the film premieres in